Are you new to cloud computing and you're looking at trying your hand out on serverless using AWS Lambda, but you're not sure how to go about it and you don't have the necessary programming skills? In this video, you're going to learn how to work on a serverless project even without knowing a programming language. Let's get right into it. Alright, so once you're logged in to your AWS console, you're going to move over to search for Lambda. So we come to the search bar and we type in Lambda. Alright, so when Lambda pops up here, we click open Lambda. However, I already have Lambda opened on another tab on my screen because I don't want to be delayed by network. Right, so I move over to Lambda here. So this is what will open when you search for Lambda. So we are going to create a function, and you can see here that Lambda lets you run code without thinking about servers. So servers are present, just that you don't need to worry about them because AWS is going to handle all the underlying infrastructure since Lambda is a fully managed service. So all you have to do is to just run your code, bring in your code, run your code, and AWS will help you think about your servers. Alright, so let's create a function. Over here, we have three options: to author from scratch, to use a blueprint that AWS has already provided, or to use a container image. So what we are going to do here is that we are going to author from scratch. However, we are still going to get a blueprint from what AWS has provided for us. We'll get the code from the blueprint. It's still good to use the blueprint straight up from here, but I don't want to use the blueprint from here. I just want to get a code and then I'll just author from scratch. Okay, even though I'm not authoring from scratch, I'm getting their own code. So over here, I'm just going to go over to get S3 object, which is this one. This is the function that we want to create. So this function is going to trigger it's going to be triggered when an S3 when an object is added to an S3 bucket. So it is going to respond and it will show us the metadata for the objects, the type of content that object is. Alright, so I'm just going to click on this, and when I click on this, if I scroll down, I'm going to see the code here for that. So this is me this is me stealing like an artist from what AWS has already provided. Right, so I'm just going to copy this. So I've copied this. Right, so I'll just go back to author from scratch. However, if you want to use the blueprint, it's fine. When you select the blueprint name, you can just go down and do other things, but I don't just want to use it from there. I want to still show you how it works if you didn't have that code there. Alright, so here we are just going to put in our function name. So I could just say my first Lambda, since this is tailored towards those who are practicing serverless for the first time. So my first Lambda, I could add function, I think. Okay, alright, so remember that the code that we copied from the blueprint was a Python code. So I'm just going to change this to Python 3.12 as well, and basically I'll leave every other thing as a default, and I'm going to create the function over here. So while we wait for the function to be created, alright, so let's just wait a few seconds for the function to be created. Alright, so it says successful. It has created our first Lambda function. So from here, we are going to come below. So this is where we have our default code. So what we are going to do is we are going to highlight everything here. Delete it, and we are going to paste that code which we copied. So Ctrl V, and it pastes the code which we had copied from the blueprint. So over here, we just deploy this code. Alright, so since this code is actually meant to be triggered when an object is added to an S3 bucket, it means we have to go over to S3 to create that bucket. right? So you can come back here and search for S3, and when you search for S3 pops up and you click it over here. However, I already have S3 opened on another tab on my device, so it's easier. So right here I create a bucket, and bucket names are meant to be very unique. So I think I'm just going to give this I CWA bucket 1 2 2 3. So I'll just give it a very unique name, and I scroll down leaving every other thing as default, and I'll create my bucket. Alright, so we have this bucket created over here, and if we open this bucket, there are no objects inside. It says 0 objects because we haven't added any object just yet. So from here, let's go back to Lambda, and when we come back to Lambda, there's something else we would have to configure, 2 more things, right? And one of it is going to be our IAM role. So if you come over to monitor, to configuration over here, and you come down to permissions, right here you'll see that Lambda actually by default created a role for you, right? And this role is to help you monitor logs from CloudWatch. However, this role does not contain access to S3, so it means that Lambda will not be able to access S3 even if I've added that code. So Lambda needs to access S3, and that means we will need to add the role here to give Lambda full access to our S3 service. So let's just click on this role name, and so it's delaying a little, so I'm just going to go over to the IAM dashboard I have here because of network. So I'll just come over to roles, and from roles here I'm going to just search for that Lambda role. So this is the role here, so I'm going to click on this, and if I come below, it's still loading the policies. Okay, so over here you can just see that we just have this one role that Lambda created by default. So we are going to add our own permissions. So let's attach policy over here. So we are going to search for S3, since it's S3 service that we are working with. So we'll just give it an S3 full access. So S3 full access, and we come over and we add permissions. Alright, so it says policy was successfully attached to role. So over here you see that we now have 2 policies. Okay, so we are almost good to go. So now with this, let's go back to Lambda. Alright, so we've been able to add our code, and we've been able to add our code over here. We've been able to configure the IAM policy, right? So the next thing we are going to do is to add the trigger. So Lambda is event driven, so it executes the code when a trigger is when there is a trigger. So we need to add that trigger, right? So over here our source definitely is going to be S3. So let's search for S3, and then we should see our bucket name over here. So this is our bucket name, and event types will do all objects create events, right? So whatever objects I'm adding will create that event. And over here we're just going to acknowledge this, and we will add this trigger. Alright, very well. So it says that the trigger into that bucket was successfully added to this our Lambda function. So we are all good to go. So the next thing we are going to do is we are going to actually practicalize what we have just done. So we'll move over to S3, and over here we are going to be adding an object to this our bucket. So when we add this object, it's going to trigger our Lambda function to return to us the type of content that this object is. So over here I'm going to add object, so add files. I'm just going to find something on my pictures. Okay, so let me just select this. Alright, so this is an image that I'm adding, and I'm just going to upload this into my bucket. Alright, so let's just wait a few minutes for it to be uploaded into the bucket. It's still uploading. It's still uploading. So the size of this file is a 1.6 MB, so 1.6 megabytes, and yes, it has been uploaded successfully. Okay, so let's close this. Alright, so now we can see that we have an object in our bucket. So we just have this one object. Even if I refresh, it's just this one object. So now we are going to go over to Lambda to see what would have happened on the side of Lambda. Okay, so let's come over to Lambda. So the thing is, we may not see it just immediately because it takes about, let's say, a minute or less to process and all of that. So when we come over to Lambda, we come back to our configurations, right? Okay, this is the trigger that we had created earlier. So we come over to monitor. So from monitor, it's still loading, right? So this is going to take think about a minute or less. And okay, you see here that it's still loading. So it's saying no data available, right? So we just have to come here and keep refreshing until we see that okay, there's a data being made available. However, what we exactly want to see is going to be on our CloudWatch logs. So I'm just going to go over here and open our CloudWatch logs to see what we have on CloudWatch. Alright, so this is loading our CloudWatch logs. So let's wait for it a minute and let's see what we have here. So let's scroll down. So this is the log over here, right? This is the log over here. So I'm just going to click this. Alright, so this is what we have over here, and you would see here that it's saying it's reporting the events and all of what has been happening, and then it gives us the content type here. And remember, the image that we added was an image. The content we added, that's the object, it was an image and it was a .png. So see it over here, it's telling us that yes, it's an image and it's a PNG file. So this is just how Lambda works. So Lambda will always be triggered when we add more objects to our bucket. So on your end, you can try to keep adding more objects and then come over to your CloudWatch logs to see what has been going on here. Alright, so I hope that with this you're able to practice more using Lambda, you're able to experiment, and you can even go further to learning how to write Python scripts or how to write Node.js or Ruby scripts, and you're good to go. Alright. Thank you and bye.